Welcome one, welcome all to another developer interview here on the Xbox Expansion Pass. Today, I am joined by John Johanas, director of the gloriously shadow-dropped Hi-Fi Rush, available on Xbox platforms and Game Pass. I am your host, Luke Lohr, the Insipid Ghost. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is a pleasure to have you. I'm sure that you have been talking nonstop about your game. Congratulations on the launch of Hi-Fi Rush. It launched to immensely positive reviews and did so seemingly out of nowhere thanks to that shadow drop. And I think the most obvious question there is, how are you feeling now, man?
Well, we are 1 week at this point as recording, 1 week from the launch. And it is still... the word I constantly use is overwhelming. We've been getting extremely positive feedback from the people who played it. Obviously, reviews are better than we could have imagined. And everyone is just blown away in the studio and excited about people discovering all aspects of the game. It's kind of fun to see everyone see it all, experience it at the same time, and everyone figuring it out. So.
Have you been jumping into streams, watching people play, or have you been kind of taking a step back? Where have you been spending your time as far as watching the reception?
Nonstop checking the internet is the correct answer. To the point where I haven't been able to do anything else like watch TV or play any other games. We've been watching streams when it was coming out, people kind of figuring out. We're always, those parts of the games where you're like, are they going to be okay? We'd always see people getting up to certain sections and we see them get, either they struggle with it, but they get past it, but they're still having fun. And then seeing all the people finding the small little details we've hidden away, seeing fan art, and all of this happening so quickly, everyone is just flipping out. So I've been trying my best to keep up, but the Twitter timeline moves so quickly now that I'm getting the game is being tagged. It's like impossible to keep up. So I have to apologize to anyone. I've been trying to almost thank everyone who's been playing the game on Twitter, but it moves so quickly. I'm probably missing a bunch of them. That's what it's been like.
It's funny you say that because when the game dropped, immediately turned on notifications for your Twitter feed, which meant that I was getting notifications that you were tweeting and trying to keep up and tracking all of that.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No, I was like, you have to mute me because I'm just thanking a lot of people. So.
But I think that's the best part about it, though, right? Like, people are getting to explore your work and play it, and it's giving the gaming community, particularly the Xbox gaming community, a really wonderful thing to celebrate at the top of the year. I have so many questions, I guess, about that in general, but I'm curious, how long has Hi-Fi Rush been in development? How long have you been waiting for this time?
So for me, since I've been there from the start, it's been about 5 years. But it was a very slow start in that sense, where we spent a long time prototyping and getting the core basic combat to a place where we thought, okay, this is it. And then we slowly added on members to eventually get to the point. And unfortunately, we had to work through the pandemic, which slowed things down considerably, like probably every game that had to do that. So maybe it took a little bit longer than we would have liked to. But in the same way, maybe that was like a blessing in disguise, because while it did slow things down, it almost gave us more time to delicately make things, like make sure that everything was like perfect and polished and correct. And so it has been a journey. I know people see it and they think it's this is a small title that they put out, after Game Pass was, after they've been acquired, and they pumped it out in about 2 years or something like that.
Is that something you're hearing?
So some people come out and say, oh yeah, this very small scale game that was probably made just by a couple people. And I'm like, it's not really the case. You should look at the credits. But yeah, it's been quite a journey, because like I said, but it's like a parabolic journey in that sense. We've been in the background.
Okay. So 5 years since the beginning, that would put you in roughly 2018. and you said you started adding members. How big was the team initially, and how big did it end at?
It will literally start with 2 people. It was
Okay.
myself and our lead programmer, Nakamura-san, and we just prototyped that fighting mechanic. And early on, we did get some assistance if we needed something that wasn't in like the asset tree or something to
Mm-hmm.
make what we needed. We got some help, some VFX sound, some motion people just kind of popped in, made a motion for us. Thank you. Okay, and then and then and then once we kind of had that prototype and we knew that we were in a good place, we kind of moved some team members over, and we were maybe about like 10 or so, maybe between like 10 or 15 people. It's kind of hard to remember exactly, but and we were working on that for a while. And then like another like year of like that, and then we just started to slowly, like a new member would join the team and we'd put them on this team, or it was a good chance for also a lot of like newer members from the company to kind of jump in. And since it's a newer IP and there was a lot of ways, it didn't take itself quite seriously, so there's a lot of ways to express yourself or try things.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good way to educate younger developers as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember like the exact count because pure developers, we still weren't like a gigantic team, but we did have a lot of people on the cutscene team, and I think you can understand why, because the quality is extremely high in that sense. So that was almost like a completely different team. It's like the cutscene
Mm-hmm.
team was just like there, but yeah, I don't think it wasn't as big as all of our other projects, but maybe at its peak, at the final end. But
Mm-hmm.
just finishing it up. But yeah, it wasn't a completely small project at the very end, like most people might think.
Gotcha. Now, when you say you move people over, are you moving them from, and I'm shooting from the hip on this one, like the Evil Within? Are you moving them from Ghostwire? Is other projects you can't mention? Are they coming from a horror background? I guess is the angle of my question.
Well, everyone theoretically was coming from a horror background, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
if they weren't on the Evil Within, they were maybe on Ghostwire. uh, and so no, we never had any. And I mean, maybe people who joined later, we kind of tried to find people who knew about this art style or this gameplay style, but for the most case, it was newer. It was people who had never done something like this before.
Mm-hmm.
We were always used to making the Evil Within games, or maybe someone had it, like in their previous job, but well, for example, our lead game designer, Yamada-san, like he has like a lot of experience working on action games going way back. And he came in later in development to help us sort of flesh it out and polish up things. Um, but was integral to making, I think, the combat feel even better than it was at that point. But for a lot of us, it was almost like uncharted territory, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. We did have some people kind of move over from Ghostwire when we realized, like, okay, that they're not needed in that aspect there, so they're better suited for this project. So
Mm-hmm.
we did some shifting around in that sense, but there wasn't a significant sort of like immediate like overflow. And the only time we had like maybe a large help from the Ghostwire team was only after they finished the project, that people came in
Gotcha.
and maybe helped us with the finishing up some stuff.
That's really fascinating. And just the departure, I suppose, from when you look at your work on the Evil Within DLC and Evil Within 2 and seeing what Tango is known for, such a departure and yet seemingly quite successful. Um, I know Hi Fi Rush is your baby. Where did the idea even come from?
uh it is just kind of like something you had in your mind for a long time. I had, you know it, I don't want to say I thought of the idea when I saw it for the first time, but definitely something that we look back was, and I mentioned this in previous interviews, was there's a scene in Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead where they're fighting zombies in a bar to Queen's "Don't Stop Me Now," and and it was just kind of like a funny moment, and everything was synchronized, and they played, and it was kind of played as like a like a that over the top
Mm-hmm.
situation. But I'm like, it feels good. It's like, it feels good, it feels fun.
Right.
And it's kind of funny that I was actually just talking with our cutscene director, Jun Watanabe, who used to work specifically at our company, and now he's freelance, but he did do all the work for us on this on the cutscenes, and he's like the key member to figure out all like the animation style. But he's like, I remember the exact moment you brought this up. It's like it was like way back, like he's like, I think it was like 2012. I was just walking past her in the hallway, and you just stopped me and said, "Wouldn't it be cool if you made an action game where like all the hits landed with the music?" And he
Mm-hmm.
was like, "That's random, but like it was a completely like unprovoked." So he's like, "That's random, but sure, sounds cool." And then we would constantly talk about it, every like once every 6 months or something like that. Obviously, it's like one of those young developer, like I don't know how we'd make it, but it sounds like a cool idea. And then
Mm-hmm.
I think I finally, after the Evil Within 2, could say that maybe I had a better understanding about not just like game development as a whole, but how systems work and how it theoretically could be possible, that I was
Mm-hmm.
able to propose either, through documentation, this is how it would work if we were to make it. So
Mm-hmm.
we should try to do it this way, not just like a kind of bland theory of like, okay, everything just works, so do that. It was kind of like, no, this is like how the motion should interpolate and things like that. And so it's an idea that you had, but I don't think it could have been made until maybe I had the experience making development that I had.
That makes perfect sense on a development side. I'm curious on a strategic side, a pitch side. Does or did you need the clout of, say, successful DLCs and the launch of Evil Within 2? Did the clout help for such what I would call a radical idea? Because if I'm trying to imagine the pitch, I couldn't do it. Like I couldn't understand. You know what I mean? It's such a departure. Um, is there an amount of trust that Tango has to put in you to say, "All right, go for it"?
uh, I mean, I was sort of entrusted with that. Thankfully, my boss Mikami-san saw the potential in the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
um, but yeah, it was something that I didn't expect to be okayed. I, I just kind of, it was so out of left field. It was so un-Bethesda that I just assumed that it would be immediately shot down. But I was like, if there's any time to pitch it, now is the time. It's like I just came off doing that project. Another horror game is in development, or at that point, it was like maybe less of a horror, but more of like a spookier type, darker game.
That
I
that
was
was
like,
Ghostwire.
yeah, that was
Okay.
Ghostwire, yeah, and kind of felt like we needed a palate cleanser, but at the same time, we had this idea, and I did know that Mikami-san's always never wanted the studio to be pigeonholed into one idea, and it's very easy to just pitch another horror game theoretically, but it's like, what if we try something different? And I'm thankful that he saw the just, I think there's an integral, maybe from a game design perspective, like an understanding between maybe music and action. It just kind of works.
Mm-hmm.
It works in movies, it works in advertisements, trailers, and things like that. And so the concept isn't unique in that sense, but it's a challenging thing to make work. So maybe based off my experience, there was, I like to believe that there was a sense of trust that let's, it wasn't a straight like, oh, 100% here's like all your budget, just go away. It's like, no, okay, if you have an idea, show me that you can actually pull it off. And so that's why we had that small team to work on that prototype, to show that it is possible. So I'm always thankful for the opportunity to even make that prototype, because it wouldn't have happened, I think, without that prototype.
For it to be so un-Bethesda, which I think I know what you mean, and I would love for you to elaborate. But did you have to fight along the way to keep your vision?
Surprisingly, no. And that was, again, thanks to that prototype, because so we
Mm-hmm.
made this prototype, and again, we knew that we wouldn't be able to make visuals for the game, and normally that's one of those first things that you do when you make a prototype for a lot of games, is you focus on like that pop out of like, hey, this looks cool or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a bunch of gray boxes, and anyone who knows Unreal knows like, like debug Unreal guy like running around the arena and stuff like that. But so we're like, okay, we want this to maybe not look cool, but it needs to play well. And
Mm-hmm.
so all we did was focus on gameplay. So it was almost a reverse of, if you want to pitch a horror game, you need to show like these cool visuals, and it's like, oh, this looks creepy and stuff like this. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not about that. It's about the game. So we just focused on the gray box thing. There's no visuals, there's no characters, there's nothing. But so we focused on game and style. So it was like this rock music thing. We did what we can to make it feel like it was like quick and sharp and fast paced. In this small prototype, and this was then passed to Bethesda, and people who played it initially, they were like, wow, this is actually a lot of fun, and there's like nothing there yet, in a sense. It's just like a bunch of blocks. And then it was kind of virally passed internally at Bethesda, and it almost got this like weird sort of like cult following. We're like, hey, did you hear about this thing? And so then when we went to actually pitch it, and at that point we kind of knew that there was like this kind of hype behind it, and so we said, if we're going to pitch it, we wanted to show like what the game would look like from an art direction perspective. And that's when we kind of went in and drew these images, which are very close to what the final game looks like. But there's like this colorful blue skies look, and it's like the idea is that the game will look like this picture. Like you would be able to see this picture and say, is that art? Is that a 2D image, or is that the game?
Mm-hmm.
And that's our goal for this. And surprisingly, at that point, like I said, there was word of mouth internally. So when we did eventually come to pitch it, it almost felt like, well, everyone seems to love it. I don't know why we wouldn't go ahead with this, type thing. So the team at Bethesda who kind of thought of that sort of almost like internal viral thing, specifically our lead producer, Todd Vaughn, he really sort of made it happen in that way.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yes, I was worried I interrupted you. Yes,
no,
makes perfect sense. I'm curious, when you look at this visual style, it stands out. It's bright, it's colorful, it's fun. I was able to bring my wife, who is a non-gamer, in to watch it, which was really cool. And I might add, she has a musical background, and I do not. So I struggled mightily, despite having an absolute blast, in seeing, like I could hear the beat, but in seeing all the little and hearing all the little like ticks that go as the better you play in your game, the more rhythm, the more beat you get, right? So she was teaching me as we were playing, and she's a non-gamer sitting on the couch, teaching me, timing with me. All right, now, try this, in a really cool, dynamic way. It was one of those just wonderful moments of my non-gamer wife and I getting to bond in something that I love. And so I thank you for giving me that memory through your art. How did you settle on the art style? Because that's the first thing to me that she noticed, that I noticed before even the music. When you see a screenshot of Hi-Fi Rush, it could be no other game. It could be nothing but Hi-Fi Rush. I've heard people mention Jet Set Radio. I've heard people mention Dreamcast, but it's Hi-Fi Rush, no doubt. Where'd you get that from?
Yeah. So in terms of the visuals, we use the examples that you just said. If it was the Jet Set Radio or Beautiful Joe or Okami, and we were looking at games that had a very strong visual identity, we knew that the game was obviously not going to be a realistic looking game.
Mm-hmm.
The premise was ridiculous. It wouldn't make sense to try to pull that off. So we knew that we wanted to go for that feeling of games that had a visual identity that you kind of remember and stick with you. But we also didn't want to just say, okay, just do what they did and just make it look better. We really worked hard to try to find this in between, where something that felt like inspired. It wasn't quite like a Japanese anime and or an American cartoon, but somewhere in between. And then then we just sort of added in all these like different layers that just kind of became what it is. It's hard to pinpoint like there was like one specific thing, but we did have like 3 keywords right from the beginning I was talking with our lead concept artist Sakai-san, and he was saying, and I just said him, okay, whatever art we do, it needs to follow these three guidelines. It's colorful, clean, and sharp. Because to me, like that was those keywords that stuck with me. Like it needs to pop out, like the way, and it worked well within the way we pitched it, because it's like we want this to be like, if you see it as like a YouTube thumbnail, you're like, wow, that looks fun. I want to play that. Like it need to look fun from just like a screenshot is the idea. So lots of like bright, obviously the colorful aspect with these bright colors, and especially in like the beginning, we want like it's like blue skies, feels good. We mess around with that a little bit as the game goes on, but that first impact, we want to just be looking very positive. And then the characters too, I don't really see them as being extremely Japanese or extremely American. They're actually helped designed by a company in Malaysia called Lemon Sky. They helped us out with refining some of the designs and things like that, because we had no experience with, we don't have like a 2D animation specialist on our team, so we're looking for as much help as we can get. And they helped us almost like create this strong image of all the characters in the game. And so it was this weird sort of amalgamation of lots of different cultures and backgrounds coming together to create what I think is something like unique and interesting. Obviously you can, like you said, you can see a thread of where it comes from, but I like to think it has its own definitive style that makes it its own.
I think you absolutely nailed that. It's funny, the three words: colorful, sharp, and what was the last one? Clean.
Yeah.
Clean. Yeah. If that was what you were going for, I cannot think of better descriptors. Because in prepping for our interview and being an Xbox content creator and going and seeking coverage, B-roll, trailers, etc., everything is sharp, it's clean, and it's just impressive to say that you guys just nailed the audio design, of course, but the visuals as well. And I have a feeling, I've not tried this, but I have a feeling, thanks to all the visual stuff that goes with it, you could almost play this without audio on and still catch the beat.
That was actually intentional. I can't say that it's easier to play with the audio off.
Sure.
But in a weird way, I know we're thinking about accessibility early. There's only, we didn't have like an expansive team to do everything that we wanted to do, but we felt that it was an experience that maybe even people who had difficulty hearing, like even they could experience. So we made sure that it wasn't just audio, because some people again have, even if they can hear, may not understand what each audio cue is. So everything has a visual element to it. If it's an enemy attack that has a sound for a warm up that you hear, there's also a visual element to it. We have the visual assists for where the beat is, the controller rumbling for when you're trying to like parry attacks and things like that. So so you can actually like feel the rhythm and then return it back at them. We did work hard to hopefully make it more accessible for people who do have hearing issues or a hearing disability and could theoretically enjoy it or almost feel like they're part of a musical experience, maybe even if they wouldn't be able to hear it. And like I said, it's hard for me to decide if it worked as it did, but I hope that there are some people who can enjoy it in that way as well.
How much work does it take to get everything that you can see to line up with everything that you hear?
A lot of work is the simple answer. Luckily, like I said before, that early phase, that sort of what is important to this game, we said that everything needs to match up to the beat. So when I was working with our lead programmer, we basically made a system that would interpolate everything that's going on to what's happening in the music, just from a beat perspective. So actually the game doesn't even, if you would turn off the music, if you would somehow go in and like remove the music files, the game wouldn't even run. Everything would just stop moving, and the player would stop moving. To the level of the music is like absolutely integral to having everything, because it's pulling from the sound data to say like, okay, it needs to, the animation needs to move at X amount of speed and things like that. And so luckily we had that we built a system around that from the very beginning. I think retroactively going back and putting that in is insanely difficult. And then it was a matter of figuring out what connects to what, and that was actually, it is done at a system level, but it was also kind of hand done in that case, where every level was sort of the pulls jumping up and down. Are they just quarter notes, or do they match this sort of like this pulse? It's like bump 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 bump, type thing that makes it feel like it's part of that stage in that song. And we had all these animation curves to make sure like they fit with like the hits landed and things like that. But it was an incredibly difficult thing. And it's funny because even from a production standpoint, music normally comes in at the end of development. It's one of like the last things that come in, and sometimes you're dealing with maybe you have a temp track or something, and then it's actually they go in and they make it. But here we need to almost get we would call a demo, a super rough version of like a song. They would make that initially, and then we would put that in, and we'd say, okay, this is the song when you're not in combat, this is the song when you're in combat. And then once we knew that, then they would come back, and then they would kind of as maybe the game went on, they would make slight differences between fights and things like that. But we almost had to redo our whole game development sort of the flow of that to accommodate for what this project was required in order to run it in this way.
For the system and the game to have to pull from sound data to get visual cues and video elements to go along with it, that would mean to me, as from an amateur and on the outside looking in, that the song design, or the song choice rather, plays an integral part into what the gameplay is going to feel like. And I would also imagine, given that you guys have a streamer mode, that you had to check on this twice. Is that right?
Yeah, the streamer modes only change the licensed songs. So luckily it's not the whole game.
Okay.
Thank God.
Because I saw that you got a few gray hairs when I mentioned that.
Yeah. Immediately aged 20 years. Yeah. If they probably said every song needs to be redone. But luckily all the original tracks did not need to be changed for streamer mode. It was the licensed tracks, because obviously copyright stuff and the way YouTube handles and Twitch handles their streaming things is always changing and difficult, and we wanted to ensure that people can enjoy it and not get punished for playing the game. And so they were all designed customly around the original licensed tracks. So after that was all done, then we came back and made the streamer mode songs, and we knew that we couldn't redo the entire fight. Like, so much of the cutscenes, so much of the attacks were all tied to musical elements from the song. So we had to basically create some original songs that kept the same vibe and hit those same sort of like notes in a way of, like, if it has to go into the chorus this way, and we need, even if it's not the same riff, something that this can latch onto, because this attack is going to come at the same time no matter what. So this needs to match up. And like I said, I always say it's just the immense amount of work that went in from our sound team, and part of our sound team would definitely include a group that formed and called themselves the Glass Pyramids for this project, to create those songs for us. They looked at the songs and kind of dissected them and saw how we were using them, and we went back and forth and put them in and had to adjust the song to make sure that they were matching correctly. And some people, it's great to see that there's that option there, because some people like the original songs obviously more, or they like the streamer songs more, which is cool also, because we didn't want to say don't play these. The whole thing was, if you play it in that version, we want you to still get the full experience, and we don't want you to think like, oh, I got a GIMP version of this song or something like that. So like I say, it's all due to the hard work of the team to make that work. That was a lot of work.
Now, the audio listeners may not have caught it, John, but the video watchers, viewers, certainly did. You grinned pretty heavily when you mentioned the Glass Pyramids. Is there any particular reason there? Is there a chuckle there for a reason?
No, it's just there's a group of people who are working, and then they're like, "These songs are really good. We should name ourselves a band." And they're like, "Yeah, let's call ourselves the Glass Pyramids." And we're like, "Sure." I mean, I don't know if that didn't have anything to do with the game. It was
Mm-hmm.
something that they wanted to do, and we thought that was so cool that a group of musicians who some had their own bands that they were in,
Mm-hmm.
um, they kind of it kind of brought them together to make a new band and make a new
Mm-hmm.
group of songs out of this, which was just really cool. Uh, yeah,
That is cool.
more music is always good things. Yeah.
Are you now? This might be my ignorance speaking, so this may be something that's well known and I just missed it. The soundtrack for Hi-Fi Rush, is that something that people can find on Spotify? Are you guys tracking that at all, or is that something Spotify, iTunes, wherever? Or is that something you're planning to put out? Because man, these tunes are good. Like they are good. Just in prepping notes, I'm listening to it.
You're talking about the original soundtrack, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
honestly, all of it. Like
Yeah.
the
I mean,
Hi-Fi
yeah.
Rush experience.
Yeah, the Hi-Fi Rush experience. That could be a good band name, maybe. Um, we don't have anything that's yet, but I would just say look at our past releases and
Sure. Not
and
trying to put you in a
take
box
it
there. I'm
from
sorry.
there. Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Wasn't trying to lock you in on anything. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So can I go back for a moment, please, to the characters in the cast? Because I've mentioned the art style. Audio is, of course, an integral part of the experience in playing Hi-Fi Rush, but you've got some eclectic, strange, fun, funny characters ripe with personality from top to bottom. The moment you're introduced to Chai, and then you meet Peppermint and 808, and they're all crazy and great and fun and hilarious, and you guys beat the absolute mess out of Chai. Goodness. Talk to me about this cast of characters, the writing that goes into creating them. And yeah, just talk to me about them because they're crazy. They're great.
Well, I'm super glad to hear that. Yeah, so it was tough working on that because we knew that more than story per se, we wanted a cast of characters that were fun and almost like you wanted to spend more time with them. Like that was the idea. It's like obviously we wanted to make sure that the story of the game and what happens in the game is exciting and fun to play through, but it's a character based game where you almost want to see like what situation these people are going to get into next or how they're going to interact with each other. And
Mhm.
so more so than like setting out this like plot and like world, Bible or something like that, we just sent out these like character sheets, and it's like, okay, what is this type of character like at the beginning, and what is this type of character like at the end of the game, and how do they interact with each different character, and what are their like strengths and weaknesses. And once we kind of worked that out, it was actually easier to write in that sense because we knew how they would almost like react.
Mhm.
And I could see how maybe it's a humorous game, and for some people it works great. They love it. They love the characters. Some people, obviously, humor lands differently for different people. They may find like a character annoying or something like that. I can totally see that because for everyone it hits differently. But we knew that we wanted this, especially for Chai, this sort of weird sort of slight annoyance to him. Like he wants to be a rock star, and if you know anyone who wants to be a rock star, they have this like larger than life persona, but they
Mhm.
aren't quite larger than life. So he is kind of like a little bit of a punching bag, but never in like a cruel way. I think the only time like people are angry at him is because he legitimately did something bad,
Mhm.
and we don't make fun of him. And he normally takes everything in stride, and he rarely gets down. I mean, there was like a nice moment towards the end of the game where there's like a self-reflection moment, and he kind of comes to his own. But even if you played into the end of the game, like he's still this very flawed character that still needs a lot of work. And also a big thing for which some people picked up was like the characters aren't like teenagers. They may look young because of the art style, but like they're like, I think Chad's like 25, 24, 25.
Mhm.
The idea of like someone, maybe who like dropped out of college is still sort of like finding their way through life and is still living that dream, almost needs to kind of like be forced into like proving themselves to do it. And that was kind of a, a fun thing to kind of think about. Cause you think about, if you have to look back at yourself at 25, like at the time you think like, I'm an adult, but if you look at yourself, if you're older than 25 or something, you're like, oh, I knew nothing. Like I was an idiot. Yeah, so that was actually just a fun thing to look back at. And I'm sure people can appreciate that aspect, but all the other characters down to even like the NPC characters, we fleshed out these like what type of robotic personalities do they have, like who do they,
the receptionist
like, the receptionist is like
yes.
Yeah, if it was an old Vandelay model or a new Vandelay model or something like that, like whether or not they were a positive thinking worker or a negative thinking worker. And yeah, the receptionist being that sort of I was positive until they took over our company. Now I hate my job, type thing, or something like that. But yeah, it's just like we rewrote it like so many times just to make sure that everything worked perfectly with the character dynamics and stuff like that. And there's so much dialogue. I think there's more dialogue in this game than probably everything we've made combined in all of our games. So I did get yelled at a little bit because they're like, you said that there would be this amount of lines and you went like 5 times over that or something like that. But it was just so much fun to write that it was a joy. So
you're seeing reception now. You're seeing reviews, like because it was shadow dropped. Of course, reviews took a bit of time, but you're seeing reviews now. Any semblance or any feelings of, I don't know that justifications, right? But like validation and say, hey, I've got this eclectic pitch back in 2018. Here we are, 2023. Game's out. Game's great. People like it. Is that a win? Like, is John putting that in the back of his mind kind of thing?
Not just me. I think the team as a whole sees it as a win because obviously it's a risky venture for our studio. Like I said, from a Bethesda perspective, maybe now that we joined Xbox, it's a little. I think that impression maybe is a little softened because they have some games that are more family friendly as well. But to see that all those targets that we wanted to hit, the accessibility, I'm not good with rhythm games, but I can play this game, the art style, oh, this brings me back to an age where I remember it. There was a lot of, because obviously we didn't know until it was released what the reception would be like, and we did have a lot of confidence, but to see that all the comments are mentioning basically, hey, all that stuff that we were saying that we thought would work, that's working, is extremely satisfying. And not like in like a haha, like I was right way, but like obviously we were worried that it would be taken the wrong way, or people would find it like too simple or too difficult. But I personally thought like we were like hitting our target exactly where we wanted to, and I believe that this was gonna get the reception that we got, but you never really know. And we weren't doing it also for critical reception too. I think we wanted it, obviously no one wants to get like bad critical reception, and we wanted to do as good as possible, but that wasn't our main goal. It was more of a having the users feel like, oh, this reminds me of like, this is of just games being fun. And that was always like the number one thing that we looked at, and that is just so immensely satisfying and gratifying to see people respond in that way.
Yeah, mission accomplished, dude. It's an absolute blast, and I'm not saying that to flatter you. It's an absolute blast. You have twice now mentioned Xbox, and early on you had mentioned Game Pass. For you to have worked on it in 2018, as early as 2018, and the beginning of the pandemic, and then Microsoft acquires Bethesda in 2021. Obviously, there had to have been a moment where Hi-Fi Rush was shown to Xbox. Were you there for that moment? Was that something that you got or heard feedback on? Did that change or impact development in any way as far as like timelines, release schedules, that kind of stuff? Logistics, I guess?
No, I mean, honestly, I heard about it when everyone else did. That didn't, it surprisingly had little to no effect on, as far as from the developer standpoint, anything that we're doing, because Bethesda as a whole is kind of treated as its own sort of entity still. So, I
Mhm.
mean, I'm sure maybe there were some higher up discussions talking about here's our product lineup, this is what we have.
Mhm.
I wasn't involved in that, but
Sure.
I like to believe that it was always shown positively as this is something that's really kind of crazy and left field. But I think we have, I think this is something that we have here that's very interesting. And yeah, I mean, as we were going towards a release, even the sort of the release campaign was the Bethesda marketing and PR team coming together
Mhm.
and thinking of the strategy. And Xbox was, I guess, totally okay with it, and
Great, dude.
they saw potential.
Yeah.
So, I didn't, negative or positive. It was weird to feel like we're almost like they're just letting us do our thing. So they're
Cool,
being very
man.
hands off. So
That's great, dude. That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that because when you had mentioned earlier on in the interview that you were worried that people thought that it was like a 2-year Game Pass filler project, um, it's clearly a project of passion that has taken time and effort, and I sincerely hope that you guys continue to receive the accolades that are well earned and well deserved, and I hope you're able to do with that success whatever it is you choose. I know that in many interviews people have asked you what's next, what do you want to do, and you barely had a chance to breathe
yeah,
at the moment. But I hope that whatever it is you guys choose to do, uh, it's something that you are equally passionate about and enjoy, for sure.
I hope so as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, John, I want to thank you sincerely for taking the time to sit down with me and talk. I'm sure it's been a busy week for you, but it's an absolute treat for me, for XEP, and for our listeners to get to hear you talk about your work. Whatever does come next for you, again, I wish you the best. What are you planning to do once this kind of press thing winds down? What's your itinerary? Are you going to get some time to chill? Are you going to go to the next thing? What's your jam? Are you going to get rest?
I want rest. I don't know if I'll get it. I want to just take some time off. Yeah, yeah. I think it's just I want to. Yeah, I want to have like a breather first before I immediately go head first into something. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, enjoy your moment, enjoy your time, and when you're able to, get some rest, my friend. John Johanas, director of Hi-Fi Rush, thank you again for your time today.
Thank you so much. It's great talking to you.